forbid we pass something that's going to help the damn workers in the United States of America.
Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan yelled at Republicans over their opposition to the PRO Act, which is the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, which of course is labor reform that both helps unions to form, but also helps to protect unions once they're formed. Now, I'm going to get to a lot more details on that after the clip. I'm also going to get into showing you the benefit of unions, not just to people that are in unions, but also to people that are not in unions in terms of wages and how it lifts all wages. But before I get to all those details, let me first play this clip, which I got to give credit here. I'm not a huge fan of Tim Ryan, but this is great.
Mr. Speaker, one of the earlier speakers said, this is the most dramatic change in labor law in 80 years. And I say, thank God. In the late 70s, a CEO made 35 times the worker. Today, it's 300 to 400 times the worker. And our friends on the other side running around with their hair on fire. Heaven forbid we pass something that's going to help the damn workers in the United States of America. Heaven forbid we tilt the balance that has been going in the wrong direction for 50 years. We talk about pensions, you complain. We talk about the minimum wage increase, you complain. We talk about giving them the right to organize, you complain. But if we were passing a tax cut here, you'd be all getting in line to vote yes for it. Now stop talking about Dr. Seuss and start working with us on behalf of the American workers. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back.
Absolutely fantastic. Tim Ryan, of course, look, he understands that this is going to make some headlines. That's part of the game, though, when you're a politician. And nothing wrong with that here. I mean, every point he makes is exactly correct. Calling out Republicans for focusing on BS cultural issues, just made-up issues like Dr. Seuss, but completely ignoring something like the PRO Act or being opposed to the PRO Act that would benefit the lives of workers, while you have some in the GOP that pretend that their party is for workers like Josh Hawley or Ted Cruz, who will not support this. But I will get into how this will benefit, how the PRO Act will benefit all workers. Now, one last thing. I mean, as I said before, I'm not a huge fan of Tim Ryan, and I have good reason. This isn't normally the Tim Ryan you see. So this is not the guy that usually, while he may rhetorically sound like he's on the side of unions, he is from Ohio, big union state, but his rhetoric often does not match up with what he actually fights for. And a good example of that is during the Democratic primary, where he kept getting into fights with Bernie Sanders over Medicare for All, his opposition to Medicare for All. Even though Medicare for All, like him claiming here that it's bad for unions when major union leaders disagree, because passing Medicare for All would then free up unions from not having to negotiate or fight for health care, allowing them to fight for something else, other benefits like raising wages or conditions in the workplace. So the idea, anyways, just I don't want to go too off on that, but that's an idea of, or an example of how Tim Ryan often is not actually on the side of workers. But in this clip, really rhetoric is everything in this clip, and he does a fantastic job of pushing back here. Now, let me get into the PRO Act by first showing you the opposition, of course, that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has to this labor's litany of dangerous ideas, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act. The idea that this is dangerous is laughable. Now, to the Chamber of Commerce, they have particular interests that do not align with labor, so you can see why they're afraid of this. But the reality is this would benefit so many people, as I'll get into. Even Joe Biden right now just came out recently to push his support for the PRO Act. Now, this will pass the House because of the majority in the House, but when it gets to the Senate, they need 60 votes to pass this. So just giving you a window into why maybe Biden feels very comfortable in being incredibly pro Act, because ultimately I think he knows it's very unlikely to pass. So often, and I say this because often the Democratic Party, much like Republicans, do take their cues from the Chamber of Commerce. So by them being so opposed to this, it does seem weird that Biden is so for it, that Democrats are so for it. But again, a lot of this is performative, knowing that they need 60 votes. So unless they get rid of the filibuster, it's unlikely we'll see the PRO Act pass. But let me get into other support here. From DSA also supports this, showing you that this has a wide range of support. When you go from, conservative Democrat Joe Biden to the DSA, there's a wide range there of people that support this, showing you this is actually a good piece of policy. And I will get into some details. First, let me show you the benefit that unions have on not just people in unions, but all workers. So this is from the Economic Policy Institute. I will link to this below the video. You can go through all the data yourself. They say here, private sector unionization has declined as a direct result of anti-union policies. So you see here, from about 1973, the decline in private sector unions has been dramatic. And this is why you need something like the PRO Act to reinvigorate this. Also, union membership and share of income gains to the top 10%, 1917 to 2015. So you see here, the blue line, share of income going to the top 10% increases as there is a clear decline in union membership from about 1961 and on. So slow decline there, ultimately really dropping off in the 1980s. And you have here, it shows you, again, the impact not just on people in unions, but in general, because when you have more unions, you have a higher standard when it comes to the workplace, forcing other workplaces that maybe are not unionized to raise their standards and their wages to compete with unionized workplaces. But when there are less unions, there is less of a reason for those non-unionized workplaces to compete. Another example here. Union membership rate and share of income going to the middle 60% of families, 1917 to 2013. So you see here the light blue line, union membership rate dropping as you have a decline in income to the middle 60% of families. So again, showing you the direct relation between union membership and how much money is actually going to the average individual or average family. Last thing here, or actually not last thing, this is the main thing. This is what I want to focus on. This is what is in the PRO Act. So there's a lot here. I'm not going to read this, obviously. But I will link to this below the video. You can read through all of it, but I'll give you a sort of quick overview here of what is in here in the PRO Act, and it is great. So under current law, employers can drag out the union process through delay procedures. Under the PRO Act, the National Labor Relations Board sets union procedures. Under current law, employers can force employees to watch anti-union propaganda. Under the PRO Act, that's outlawed. Under current law, workers can wait years to receive back pay after being unlawfully fired for organizing. Under the PRO Act, it requires the National Labor Relations Board to go to court to immediately reinstate those workers over the anti-union activity. Current law, employers face no civil penalties for violating workers' rights. But under the PRO Act, employers face civil penalties and corporate officials can also be held personally liable. So this is, before I go on here, this is I think a major piece of the equation, because it's not just about the companies facing fines, because often you'll see, these, especially when it comes to massive companies that can absolutely afford to pay civil penalties. If it was just that, then these companies would continue violating workers' rights, just paying small fines to get away with it, and it wouldn't really impact them. But by also being able to hold the corporate officials of those companies personally liable, that is what really scares these larger companies into ensuring that they do not violate workers' rights. So by the PRO Act including that, it's a brilliant step towards ensuring that employers actually treat their workers with respect by just following the law. Also, under the PRO Act, workers can also file civil action themselves against their employer. In current law, workers can be forced to waive their rights to collective or class action litigation, but under the PRO Act, collective and class action waivers are banned. Also, under current law, employers can misclassify workers as independent contractors, but under the PRO Act, employers must follow a legal test to know how to classify their workers. Last thing here, under the PRO Act, it prohibits employers from permanently replacing striking workers. So again, there's a lot There's actually a few more, several other pieces in here that I did not touch on, but check out this link, read through it to understand the difference between current law and what the PRO Act does. Last thing here, just a reference. I'll also link to this below the video. This is a piece in Jacobin. The PRO Act is the most ambitious labor law reform bill in generations. I've had to do a lot of reading here to really ensure that I'm not being tricked because under Joe Biden, this is not something I would normally expect. Joe Biden does have a very conservative record. While he talks, in the past, has talked a big game when it came to supporting unions, in reality, when it comes to actual policy, we have not seen that. So this is really, the PRO Act is really the first real example of Joe Biden being in support of something that is substantial in support of unions. But again, they're also very aware that it has a uphill battle when it comes to getting passed in the Senate. So unless they do something about the filibuster, very unlikely to see this passed. That said, don't give up hope. I think it's important that people get involved and push support for the PRO Act out there. And you are seeing major unions get involved in this and really push for this. So we will see if that pressure will lead to potentially filibuster reform or getting rid of it and allowing this to get through. But of course, we're going to have to wait and see on that. But ultimately, Tim Ryan, to get back to the initial part or the beginning of this video, Tim Ryan there really doing a great job at communicating why this is important and Republican opposition to anything that actually helps workers.